Well, this is really incredible to be here on so many different levels. A special thanks to the Lundbeck Foundation to sponsor this award, to bring us out here. Denmark has really been incredible hosts. What I hope to do is really over the next few minutes just kind of talk about how all of this happened, because although Khan Academy is often associated with me, I get an undue amount of credit for it, and it exists because of a lot of people, many of y'all even in this room. Just to start off, I mean, how many of you have used Khan Academy at some time? Okay, good. How many of you have children or relatives using Khan Academy? A number. And how many of you before today have no idea what Khan Academy is? Okay, good. That's there. We'll learn something together. So those of you who are familiar with Khan Academy, it's often associated with videos, but we'll see it's much more than just videos. But to get everyone on the same page, I'll start with this montage that has sound. I could narrate it.
Excellent question, LeBron.
And you can just see the pleasure he had.
The right to privacy as such is not spelled out in the Constitution. Of course, the word liberty is.
Things actually can interbreed, although for these two in particular, it seems like the mechanics would get kind of difficult.
And I can keep playing around with these numbers and see what kind of colors I can come up with.
If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
Y'all like Euler's identity more than most crowds. It speaks well of you. But as I mentioned, it's much more. There's exercises, students can get practice, tools for teachers, could go on and on. It's all non-for-profit, it's all for free. There's no commerciality to any of it. This is just a snapshot of where Khan Academy is today. But before talking more about the future, I'm just going to give you a little bit of how this happened, because it really has, I still pinch myself that it's even happening the way it is. You rewind back about 12 years. I had a cousin who was 12 years old. She was having trouble with math. Because of that, she was being placed into a slower math class. I offered to tutor her. She accepts. Her name's Nadia. And long story short, she was in a different city. I was in Boston. She was in New Orleans. I tutor her remotely. Slowly but surely, she gets caught up with her class. Then she gets actually a little bit ahead of her class. At that point, I become what I call a tiger cousin. And I call up her school. Teachers love these calls. And I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should retake that placement exam from last year. And they said, who are you? And I said, I'm her cousin. And surprisingly, they let her retake that test. And the same Nadia that was being placed into a remedial math class was then put into an advanced math class. So I was hooked, a little small intervention on my part, and it helped my cousin. So then I started working with her younger brothers. And then over the next 2 years, my family, we move out to Northern California. But more important to this story, word gets around the family that free tutoring is going on. And I find myself every day after work working with 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country. And the first Khan Academy had nothing to do with videos. I was actually writing the exercises to fill in gaps in their knowledge. And I was showing this off at a dinner party, and the host of the party says, well, this is cool, Sal, but how are you scaling your actual lessons? And I said, Zuli, his name's Zuli, I said, it's actually difficult to do with 15 cousins what I was originally doing with 1 or 2. And he says, well, I have an idea. Why don't you record your lessons as videos and upload them onto YouTube for your cousins? And I immediately said, no, that's a horrible idea. YouTube is for cats playing piano, not serious mathematics. But I went home that weekend. I got over the idea that it wasn't my idea. And And I decided to give it a shot. And those first things were just things my cousins were having difficulty with. I started telling them, why don't you watch these ahead of time, and then when we get on the phone, we can dig deeper. And then famously, after about a month, I asked them for feedback, and they said that they liked me better on YouTube than in person. And at first, that's a little bit counterintuitive, but we've all been there. You're trying to learn something for the first time. It's stressful. You don't want to admit that you forgot some of your elementary math, or it's in the middle of the night and there's no one there who could help you. And so I took that as positive feedback. I kept going. And it soon became clear that people who are not my cousins were watching. And at first, I see the view count go up. Then I start to see comments come in. Some of those early comments were just simple thank yous. Even that I thought was a pretty big deal. Most of the comments on YouTube are not thank you. They're a little bit edgier. But then they got more intense. This is how I was able to pass my algebra class. This is the reason why I'm able to go back to college as a retired soldier. In the early days, I got a letter from a mother. I brought my wife over. I was like, this is incredible. She said that her sons had a learning disability, and these were the only ways that they were able to keep up with their class. And because of that, her and her entire family were praying for me and my entire family every night. And, that was incredible by itself, but it was especially strange for me. You have to remember, my day job, I was working as an analyst at a hedge fund. I was not used to people praying for me, at least in that way. So anyway, you fast forward to 2009. It seemed like something real was here. I sat down with my wife. We had a little bit of a savings, essentially for a down payment on a house. Our first child had just been born. But I decided to take the plunge to say, hey, let's see if we can turn this into a real foundation, a real non-for-profit. So I quit my job, and anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, you almost have to take that leap of faith, a little delusional leap of faith, where you just assume that surely someone will come out of the woodworks and support what you're doing. But I think, like a lot of y'all might have noticed as entrepreneurs, that you then come to terms with reality. You get a lot of people saying, well, this is a good idea, but it's not exactly what we would fund. And 10 months into it, it was pretty stressful. We were digging into our savings, about $5,000 a month. Our child was there. I was waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. What had I done to my family? And right at around that time, all of a sudden, I was getting a few $100s a month in donations. If it was any of you, thank you. But it was pretty tough. But right about that time, a $10,000 donation came in. And it was from someone named Ann Doer, and I immediately emailed her, and I said, thank you so much for this incredibly generous donation. It's the largest donation that Khan Academy has ever received. If we were a physical school, you would now have a building named after you. And Ann immediately responds back, says, well, I use it myself, I use it with my daughters, I want to learn more about what you're doing. So the next week, we're having lunch at an Indian buffet restaurant, and Ann asks me, what's your goal? And I said, when I filled out the paperwork to be a public charity, I wrote a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And Ann said, well, that's ambitious. How do you see yourself doing that? And I told her, no, to be clear, it's a mission statement. I don't plan on just being able to do it this weekend and then move on to healthcare or something. But I showed her, I used to have this notebook of testimonials from around the world. I showed her the view count. I showed her these screenshots of the software, how it would be about practice and whatever else, and tools for teachers, and internationalize it. And Ann said, well, you've made a surprising amount of progress. I only have one question. How are you supporting yourself? And in as proud of a way as possible, I said, I'm not. And so she registers that. We part ways. 10 minutes later, I'm driving into my driveway, and I get a text message from Ann. And it says, you really need to be supporting yourself. I've just wired you $100,000. So that was a good day. A little bit. And then, frankly, it was the beginning of a cascade of crazier and crazier events. A month later, I was running a little summer camp. I literally had a trading floor of middle school students. I was running this market simulation. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of that, I started getting text messages from Ann, which you could imagine I now take very seriously. And there was 5 or 6 of them. It wasn't clear what order they came in. But they essentially read, this is Ann writing, I'm at the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm in the main pavilion, thousands of people, Bill Gates on stage, last 5 minutes talking about Khan Academy. So I didn't know what to make of this. I immediately boot the nearest 7th grader off of a computer, and I start looking for some evidence of this thing that Ann is talking about. And after about 5 minutes, I was actually able to find video footage, and this is what I saw.
There's a new website that I've just been using with my kids recently called Khan Academy, K-H-A-N. Just one guy doing some unbelievable 15-minute tutorials. My favorite vignette is that guy, Salman Khan. He was a hedge fund guy. Making lots of money, and he quit to do these little web videos. And so we have moved, I'd say, about 160 IQ points from the hedge fund category into the teaching many people in a leveraged way category. So, that was a good day, the day that his wife let him quit his job.
And so you can imagine what was going on in my head. I mean, I was literally shaking when I saw that. I was like, pinching myself, is this real? I actually became nervous. Those videos were for Nadia, not Bill Gates. And then I went home. I remember having dinner with my wife, and I told her about this, and I said, well, what do I do now? What's the protocol? Do I call him? assuming he's not listed. And they left me in that limbo state for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I'm in my walk-in closet, which was the headquarters of Khan Academy, and I'm about to record a video, and my cell phone rings. I see it's a Seattle number. I answer it. Hello? Hi, this is Larry Cohen. I'm Bill Gates' chief of staff. You might have heard that Bill's a fan. Yeah, I heard that. And if you're free over the next few weeks, we would love to fly you up and see ways that we could work together. And I was looking at my calendar for the month. Completely blank. So I said, yeah, I've got to cut my nails, do some laundry, but I think I can fly up to Seattle and meet with Bill. So we had that meeting, and it was eerily similar to the meeting with Ann. At around the same time, some folks from Google reached out, asked the same questions. What would you do? What's the vision here? And I said, translate it, tools for teachers, exercises across subjects and grades, localize it, make it available to someone if they just have a low-cost device. If you're a young girl in a slum in Calcutta, that if you have access to no school, that you could self-educate yourself. And if you ideally do have access to a school, that we can supercharge that classroom, make it more personalized, free up the teacher to do more human engagement. And so that's what we started working on. So all of a sudden, in 2010, we had that first support to become a real organization. And what we immediately started working on is this exercise platform, which is really this idea of allowing students to take ownership of their learning, to start wherever they are, whether you're in a refugee camp or you're in a slum in some city, or whether you're Bill Gates' children, and fill in all of those gaps so that you don't eventually hit a wall in algebra, not because you're not bright or because algebra is difficult. It's because you have those gaps, those Swiss cheese holes in your knowledge that we want to help people actually fill. So these are just pictures of Khan Academy being used all over the planet. And I feel oftentimes one of the luckiest people on the planet to even just get pictures like this. And these are a lot of other NGOs taking Khan Academy into the field. And all of these are pretty incredible stories. Probably the most incredible ones at the top right. A couple of years ago, I used to say at talks like this, who knows, maybe one day we'll be used in Mongolia, just imagining the furthest place on the planet. And then a few months later, I got an email from Mongolia, the young woman in the top right there, and she actually had a video testimonial. And in that, she talks about how Khan Academy helped her learn math, and she likes math now. And I immediately assumed that she must be middle class or upper middle class. Her English was quite good. She had access to the internet. But then I read the text of her email, and it turns out that volunteers had traveled to Mongolia and set up computer labs with internet in orphanages. And what you see in the top right there, those are the orphan girls using Khan Academy, and Zaya was one of those orphans. And what's really exciting about the story is, since then, Zaya, and this just tells you just how much potential there's in the world if you allow people to tap into it. Since then, Zaya has become one of the top contributors to Khan Academy in the Mongolian language. So these are just some snapshots of all of the different portals that we're trying to create around the world. It's being translated into over 30 languages, where these are some of the major regions, and we're trying to make it so over the next 5 or 10 years, it's accessible to every student on the planet. But just to get a flavor for at least what the videos look like, we're trying to make everything available, the entire platform. I'll show you this next video.
Me comí 2 cuartos de pizza.
L'hypoténuse commune, ok.
7, 13, 15.
और मैं इस हाथ से इस ब्लॉक को धकेलने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ इस डायरेक्शन में.
توجد قطعتين من معدن النحاس والزنك.
P R به توان 2 ضرب داره.
הגיעה הנקודה שבה שוק הסיום של הזווית חותכת את מעגל היחידה.
ili muweze kuelewa na kuweza.
Into yokuqala kufuneka siyazi kukuba kubani
16 bölü 16 1'e eşittir.
Muitas e muitas outras coisas importantes.
I'm Zaya from Mongolia. Your videos are so interesting and funny. Make more lessons.
I watch that when I get lazy. So these are just more pictures of Khan Academy being used throughout the world. And I'll just finish off, especially given the context that we're here today, with a little bit of a thought experiment. If you were to travel back 400 years, let's say to Denmark in Western Europe, even then it was one of the more literate parts of the world, but you would have seen about 15% of the population actually knew how to read, about 20% of men and about 10% of women. And I suspect that if you went to someone who was literate, say a member of the clergy, and you asked them, what percentage of the population do you think is even capable of reading? If you had a perfect education system, they might have said, well, maybe 40 or 50%. Well, you fast forward to today, we know that that would have been a wildly pessimistic prediction, that pretty close to 100% of the population is capable of reading. But if I were to ask any of you a similar question today, what percentage of the population do you think is capable of learning calculus? What percentage of the population is capable of contributing to cancer research or pushing the frontiers of environmental science or addressing climate change or physics, whatever it might be, starting the next Google? I think a lot of us would say, well, based on our experience, 1 to 5%, maybe with a great education system, maybe 10, 15%. But what if that view of the world is just based on experience, where so many students either did not have access to school to begin with, or even those that were in schools were pushed ahead at a set pace. So even when they had a gap in, say, negative exponents, it never got addressed. So eventually they hit a wall in algebra class, or eventually hit a wall in genetics. And so they never, even though they might have had the creativity to make the next great leap in physics or genetics or whatever else, they never even got a chance to show that potential. And what's exciting now, this would have just been a utopian talk 20 or 30 years ago, but now we have the tools at our disposal to actually address that, to give the Zayas of the world the actual access so they can tap into their incredible potential, and for every student to be able to address their gaps and move forward at their own pace. And what's really neat is that together, we could accelerate the rate of change in everything in a very positive ways, medical discoveries, positive political change, whatever it might be. And in doing so, we actually have a chance, and this would have seemed like science fiction only a few years ago, of this idea of every human being being able to learn whatever they want at whatever level that they have the aspiration to go to, that actually can be a fundamental human right. Thank you.